And the first set of hooks now open, now working on the second set.
First set of hooks, open and nominal.
Second set of hooks now driving. All quiet here in the mission control room here in Houston, the International Space Station Flight Control Room. Once the undocking is complete and Endurance is outside of the approach ellipsoid, which will end joint operations between us and the SpaceX team in Hawthorne, the Expedition 73 crew will move into a pre-sleep period and a lengthy sleep period overnight and an off-duty day tomorrow. The second set of hooks now open, standing by for undock burn number 1. Dragon and the International Space Station flying into an orbital sunrise. All hooks confirmed to be open.
All hooks now open and nominal. Dragon separation.
And we have undocking. Physical separation confirmed at 5:15 p.m. Central Time, 6:15 p.m. Eastern Time, as the station and Dragon flew 260 miles over Jakarta, Indonesia. And undock burn number 2 has been completed. And depart 0 burn now underway. You can see those Draco thrusters doing their thing, opening up an increasingly quicker separation rate between Dragon and the station. Depart 0 burn complete.
Depart burn 0 complete. Performance nominal.
Visiting vehicle officer here reports good trajectory as Dragon Endurance leaves the International Space Station, from which it docked 146 days ago. We're about 4 minutes away from depart burn number 1. That'll be a 22-second firing of the Draco thrusters to increase the acceleration of Endurance away from the international outpost. Again, physical separation, undocking occurring at 5:15 p.m. Central, 6:15 p.m. Eastern Time, as Dragon and the station flew 260 miles over Jakarta, Indonesia. And again, we will remain in integrated operations with Hawthorne, California and SpaceX Mission Control until the time that Endurance has exited the approach ellipsoid, which is that 2 by 2 by 4 kilometer invisible boundary, basically a racetrack shaped oval type boundary that represents the vicinity of the neighborhood of the International Space Station within which integrated operations are conducted. Anne McLean, Nicole Ayers, Takoya Onishi, and Kirill Peskov beginning the journey home that will culminate with their parachute-assisted splashdown off the coast of California Saturday morning. The track of Dragon in the station will carry it a moment from now across Malaysia and then just south of Manila, the capital of the Philippines. Everything has gone by the book. All of the pre-departure preparations went per the timeline. The undocking was deliberately pushed back a few minutes to gain better visibility, communications, and camera views of Dragon as it departed the International Space Station. We still are headed for a splashdown on Saturday morning at 10:33 a.m. Central Time, 8:33 a.m. Pacific Time off the coast of California. This will be the fourth time that SpaceX will have executed a splashdown and recovery off the coast of California, following in the footsteps of Fram-2, the 32nd commercial resupply mission, a cargo Dragon, and then most recently Axiom 4, but this will be the first time that a California splashdown will have been executed as part of the commercial crew program. We're about 25 seconds away from departure burn number 1. This is a 22-second firing with a delta velocity change of 0.6 of a meter per second to further increase Endurance's opening rate from the International Space Station. That will be followed seconds later by its exit from the keep-out sphere, the first of these two boundaries within which integrated operations are occurring, and depart burn 1 underway.
Depart burn 1 complete. You are go to DOF suits per procedure 4.012. Reminder, ground will be deactivating the big loop following exit from the approach ellipsoid.
Dragon now maneuvering.
Crew-10 copy. Go to DOF suits. To the ISS crew, Expedition 73 Bravo. It is an absolute privilege to cross paths with you. Good luck in the rest of the mission. Godspeed.
Anne, Vapor, Talk, and Kirill, thank you for your wishes. We wish you fair winds and following seas. It's been an honor for all of us around the world to support you as you lived and worked on the International Space Station. We cannot wait to welcome you home to the blue skies of Earth.
Endurance Commander Anne McClain exchanging words with
Crew-10 station on a big loop. Fair winds and following seas. It was a huge honor to work with you all. We're going to miss you, and we can't wait to see you back on Earth.
Likewise, Johnny and the rest of the crew, have a great mission.
Again, Endurance Commander Anne McClain wishing all the best and a big vote of thanks.
Dragon and Station, Houston on the big loop. Dragon has exited the keep-out sphere.
And as you heard, Endurance is now outside of the keep-out sphere. The next milestone will be coming up about 11 minutes from now, and that will be the approach ellipsoid exit to conclude joint integrated operations. And you heard those words from spacecraft communicator Tess Caswell here in Mission Control, as well as NASA astronaut Johnny Kim, who remains on board the station until early December as part of the Expedition 73 crew. So with Endurance well on the way on the first leg of its journey home that will culminate with its splashdown off the coast of California Saturday morning, we're about to conclude joint integrated operations with Hawthorne here in Mission Control in Houston. And so with that, we will toss it back to Ronnie and Anna at SpaceX Mission Control in Hawthorne, California.
Thanks, Rob. So as you mentioned, we are now waiting for Dragon to exit the approach ellipsoid, or AE, which is another imaginary shape, this time a three-dimensional ellipsoid, measuring 4 kilometers by 2 kilometers by 2 kilometers. As an easy visual, that's roughly like the shape of a football or maybe a rugby ball, which is appropriate given that our commander today is a rugby player. And it's in exactly the same family as the keep-out sphere for operational purposes. One of the key differences with the AE, though, is that vehicles outside of it have to be on what we call a 24-hour safe, free drift trajectory. That means that the spacecraft would not cross into the approach ellipsoid for at least 24 hours. Again, even if it lost all maneuvering for that call-out once we hear confirmation that Dragon is outside of the AE.
And then after the Dragon spacecraft crosses the approach ellipsoid, as Rob mentioned, joint operations will end and the responsibility for the spacecraft will be handed back to the SpaceX flight control team here in Hawthorne, California. Again, everything continuing to look good with today's departure for Crew-10 from the International Space Station. Dragon is now just under 400 meters away from the International Space Station. And to recap, the hatches between the International Space Station and Dragon were closed earlier today around 1:04 p.m. Pacific, 4:04 p.m. Eastern Time. And since then, the crew has settled in to begin their 17-and-a-half-hour journey back to Earth. The joint NASA and SpaceX teams then pulled go to proceed with Undock. Undock was delayed by
SpaceX Dragon contact and handheld microphone.
I have you loud and clear on the cabin mic on the big loop.
Okay, we can hear you loud and clear.
And those comms there were with the core or the crew.
SpaceX Dragon, com check on Dragon to ground.
I've got you loud and clear on Dragon to ground. How me?
Okay, same. Thanks.
Again, those comms there were between JAXA astronaut Takuya Onishi and the core, the crew operations resource engineer in SpaceX Mission Control in Hawthorne, just behind us. And again, to recap a little bit, the undock command was sent around 3:10 p.m. Pacific, 6:10 p.m. Eastern. This was then followed by umbilical retraction and hooks opening, with that physical separation then taking place at 3:15 p.m. Pacific, 6:15 p.m. Eastern, as the space station and Dragon were traveling 260 statute miles over Indonesia. Dragon has since completed 2 of 4 departure burns and exited the keep-out sphere. Again, that is that 200-meter invisible boundary around the International Space Station. We are now about 5 or so minutes away from Dragon crossing the approach ellipsoid to set the spacecraft and Crew-10 up for their path back to Earth. Dragon is now about 500 meters away from the International Space Station. Again, that range and range rate continuing to increase as it continues on its departure. Again, Dragon is targeted to splash down off the coast of California tomorrow, August 9th at 8:33 a.m. Pacific, 11:33 a.m. Eastern, marking the completion of their 5-month science and research mission.
Of course, if you're following along, you've noticed that in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen, we have updated the telemetry that we're sharing with you, now tracking the speed and altitude of the Dragon spacecraft. There we've got a shot on your screen right now of onboard the Dragon spacecraft. Our crew inside has been given the go to doff their suits. Generally speaking, we always have the astronauts in their suits when we're in dynamic phases of flight. That's because the spacesuits are effectively an extension of the spacecraft. If we needed to for any reason, the spacesuit is designed to keep the astronauts safe. Now that we've cleared that dynamic phase, it's time for them to take those suits off, get a little bit more comfortable for their 17.5-hour journey home.
And then they will put those suits back on just before they begin that deorbit phase. So they'll have a little bit of time to get some sleep, get a meal, and really settle in since it is a 17.5-hour journey. Again, we are about 5 or 6 minutes away from exiting the approach ellipsoid. Again, that is that 2 kilometer by 2 kilometer by 4 kilometer invisible boundary that we are waiting for Dragon to exit. And once that happens, Crew-10 will no longer be in integrated operations, and you did hear them setting up some of the communications directly between SpaceX Mission Control and Hawthorne and Crew-10 aboard Dragon, so it'll be a direct communication with them without the station crew in the loop there. And right now, Dragon is about 600 meters away from the International Space Station, as the International Space Station travels about 260 statute miles over the Pacific Ocean off of the coast of Japan. And the International Space Station does go through an orbit every 90 minutes or so. And when we had that undocking, you could see the sunrise. So they were coming into an orbital daytime during that undocking. And that is actually why the undock was delayed by about 10 minutes, just to allow better comms and to get those great views from the International Space Station.
As you mentioned, because we're orbiting the Earth roughly every 90 minutes, our Crew-10 astronauts and those astronauts still on board the International Space Station are seeing about 15 sunrises and sunsets every day.
And there on your screen, you're seeing a live look inside the SpaceX Mission Control here in Hawthorne. Again, the Dragon and the International Space Station do go in and out of signal as they transition satellites, which is known as a loss of signal. And then once they reacquire signal, that'd be acquisition of signal. And there you can see a live look of Dragon from the International Space Station. And those cameras on the International Space Station are actually controlled by a flight controller in Mission Control in Houston known as Cronus. So they actually manually work to follow Dragon during its approach as well as during its arrival and docking, which happened back in March.
You can already see, as we get this last glimpse of Dragon as it departs the station, how much smaller Dragon is from these cameras on board the International Space Station. We talked about this a little bit earlier, but even though the rate of separation between these two vehicles right now is smooth and steady, which is exactly how we want it to be, they are both traveling about 17,000 miles per hour, which is a just tremendous amount of speed and energy that we have moving between these vehicles. So it's important that every phase of this process is planned, carefully executed, so that we understand what's coming next.
And right now, Dragon is about 750 meters away from the International Space Station. So again, continuing to increase that gap between the space station and Dragon as we continue to await confirmation of approach ellipsoid exit. And there on your screen, you can actually see a map which depicts where Dragon and the International Space Station are flying. Again, they're flying over the Pacific Ocean.
We have kind of the zoomed in view here available on your screen right now, but you can always see our position relative to the Earth in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. You can see that little light where we have Dragon over, again, the Pacific Ocean. And then right next to that, you can see a map of Dragon's Draco thrusters. Each of those little white puffs that you see are small adjustments that the Draco thrusters on board Dragon are making to control its position. In spacecraft, we generally refer to that as the spacecraft's attitude, but we are talking about the relative 3D orientation of the spacecraft.
And right now that range rate is about 1.1 meters per second, so slowly starting to increase that speed as Dragon continues to make its departure from the International Space Station. As we stand by for confirmation of approach ellipsoid exit, the Dragon spacecraft is currently over 830 meters away from the space station. Again, this is following its undocking and physical separation about 18 minutes ago at 3:15 p.m. Pacific, 6:15 p.m. Eastern. And following the physical separation, which required those 2 short undock burns, we did have 2 departure burns, and that was the first 2 of 4 departure burns. The depart burn 2, which is the 3rd departure burn, will be coming up about 30 minutes or so after approach ellipsoid exit, and then that will be followed by the final departure burn, depart burn 3, before they get into those phasing burns and then set Dragon up for its deorbit burn early tomorrow morning ahead of splashdown off the coast of California.
We talked about this a little bit earlier on too, but following that phasing burn, Dragon is going to complete deorbit reentry and splashdown. During our deorbit sequence, several events are going to occur, including trunk separation, closure of the nose cone, a deorbit burn, deployment of our drogue and main parachutes, and finally splashdown.
And then after splashdown, there's still quite a few activities that have to take place to actually hoist Dragon up onto the recovery vessel. The recovery vessel for this is the Shannon. And so the recovery team is getting staged out there. The boat is on its way to the splashdown location, and then there will be a set of helicopters that take the recovery team out to the boat, and they also have 2 fast boats, and so those fast boats will be the first ones out to the splashdown location following that 8:33 a.m. Pacific splashdown tomorrow morning, and they do some initial checks to ensure the safety of the spacecraft before they begin safing it to prepare to lift it up onto the recovery vessel.
And of course, once Dragon is on board our recovery vessel, we're going to help the crew egress or exit Dragon. And then we'll also do some quick recovery of the time-sensitive scientific experiments and cargo on board, sending those to different research labs
Dragon,
all around.
SpaceX on the big loop. Dragon has exited the approach ellipsoid and is on a 24-hour safe free drift trajectory. Configure comm for Dragon aground in preparation for disabling the big loop.
SpaceX Dragon copies. Thank you.
And so we did hear confirmation just now that Dragon has exited the approach ellipsoid. Again, that is that invisible boundary measuring 4 kilometers by 2 kilometers by 2 kilometers, and the same family as the keep out sphere. And vehicles outside of it have to be on what we call a 24-hour safe free drift trajectory, which means the spacecraft would not cross into the approach ellipsoid for at least 24 hours, again, even if it lost all maneuvering. So now that Dragon and Crew-10 are well on their way back to Earth to conclude their 5-month science and research mission aboard the International Space Station, let's check in one more time with Rob Navius and Mission Control Houston.
Thanks, you guys. You mentioned some of the critical activities that are coming up. The most critical activity tomorrow for the Endurance crew will be that deorbit burn that you mentioned. That will be a 17.5-minute retrograde firing of the Draco thrusters, basically a braking maneuver to slow Endurance down by 115.4 meters per second, allowing it to drop out of orbit for its high-speed entry back into the Earth's atmosphere. The direction of travel will keep the heat shield in the direction of travel to repel the temperatures that will build up to some 2,500 degrees around the spacecraft and its 4 occupants. Here in Mission Control, the team led by Flight Director Allison Bollinger is now winding down its activities. The crew on board the station moving into a pre-sleep period. They will wake up in time, however, to watch all of the critical activities that will be uplinked to them for the return of Endurance and its parachute-assisted splashdown in the Pacific Ocean. So with that, we'll wrap it up here in Mission Control in Houston and turn it back to you guys in Hawthorne.
Thanks, Rob. As you mentioned, with that, Crew-10 has officially departed the International Space Station. It's going to take them about 17.5 hours until they make their way back to Earth. The crew is currently doffing or removing their spacesuits to settle in for that ride home. As we've mentioned previously, Dragon is targeted to splash down off the coast of California at 8:33 a.m. Pacific time tomorrow, Saturday, August 9th, followed by the crew getting picked up at sea by a SpaceX recovery vessel. As they rest up, our teams here will continue to keep an eye on the weather to ensure a safe return for Dragon and our Crew-10 astronauts.
And although our undocking coverage is concluding for today, you can continue to follow along with Crew-10's journey back to Earth by listening to real-time mission audio, the same operational communication used by flight controllers on the ground on NASA's YouTube channel. Meanwhile, we will rejoin for live visual coverage starting a little more than 1 hour prior to splashdown at 7:15 a.m. Pacific, 10:15 a.m. Eastern tomorrow. And as always, you can find mission updates on X, at NASA, at SpaceX, and online at NASA.gov. Thanks again for watching. We'll see you soon, and our Crew-10 astronauts back on Earth very soon.
of a telescope became extraordinarily challenging.
The 405 is